Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Hey Guys Laughing Out Loud back again with another video. Today's video is my unboxing and overview of the GIGABYTE Aorus RTX 2080 Ti Extreme WaterForce Edition. Yes, that's a mouthful. Before we get started with that, I have a few announcements. I do want to apologize for the poor camera setup and the lack of video editing due to time constraints and the fact that my studio content creation setup isn't quite ready. I'm just having to work with what I have here. Second, my allergies are giving me a little grief today, so I may sound a bit congested. Third, for any of you who are interested in my variety gaming live stream, I am now multi-streaming to YouTube, Twitch, Mixer, and Steam. So I invite you to please feel free to drop by and hang out. Fourth, unfortunately, I do not have a scale, so I will not be able to give you guys the weight of the card in case that was something you were interested in. Finally, I will be performing a 24-hour live streamed stress test of the GIGABYTE Aorus RTX 2080 Ti. And while I do not recommend that anyone actually watch this live stream, you are invited to pop in and check the status. The reason for this is because, as some of you may or may not be aware, the 2000 series cards from NVIDIA, some of them have had some issues with artifacting and the Space Invaders issues. And there have been some really good analysis and investigations into what might have been the cause of that. And although we did not get a definitive answer, we were able to determine, not that I was a part of that testing because I was not, but just from, watching videos from Hardware Unbox, Gamers Nexus, and a few other channels, it was kind of determined that it was just basically a bad batch of cards. And that does happen sometimes. But as Hardware Unbox has done, they did a 48-hour live stream stress test for their card to make sure that that wasn't something that they would have to worry about. And I decided to do the same, but Tim said that it's not necessary to actually do a 48-hour stress test. 24 should be more than enough because all the cards that were failing generally started to fail only after 6 to 8 hours of actual use, and that was with playing video games versus an actual stress test. So a stress test will stress the cards more and for a longer period of time. So if my card is actually going to fail, I should find out within the 24-hour period. Now, moving on, this video that I'm creating here is going to consist of 3 main parts. The first is just going to cover the overview with specs about the card, and then we'll move into the actual unboxing. The second part will just kind of discuss why I decided to buy a 2080 Ti. And then finally, why I chose to go with the GIGABYTE Aorus over the MSI and EVGA hybrid models, as those are somewhat available. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get into the overview and unboxing. Now, if any of you are looking for more detailed information about this card, specifically the air-cooled version, Brian over at Tech Yes City has done a full review and benchmarks of this card. Now, the card I have is the same card, with the only difference that mine is the water-cooled version. Brian actually had the air-cooled version. These cards are very scarce, very difficult to acquire, but he was able to benchmark and test the air-cooled version, and the benchmarks are fantastic. So if you want to get that information, I will drop the link in the comment section below. Just to throw it out there, I am in no way affiliated with Tech Yes City. I'm just a fan of the channel, and I greatly appreciate the work that Brian does over there. Okay, so I want to go ahead and cover the base specs that are even across all the 2080 Ti cards first, and then I'll go ahead and discuss the differences with this particular card. All the 2080 Ti cards are equipped with 4,352 CUDA cores. RTX ops are 81. The memory is 11 gigabytes of GDDR6, and we are looking at 14,140 megahertz memory speed, 352 on the bus, and 616 on the memory bandwidth. These cards do provide a two-way NVLink SLI, and the power connectors are generally going to be dual 8 pins or 2 plus 6 pins. So you can take your pick. Power supply delivery or power supply recommended is going to be 750 watts. I have seen a few sites say 650. I guess you could try that. I haven't actually tested it, but I like to always have a little overhead, so I went ahead and went with a 750 watt. Now let's go ahead and move into the Gigabyte card of what we're unboxing today as far as the differences. And the core clock on this card, as you can actually see, let's see, is going to be 1770 megahertz versus the reference card, which is 1545 megahertz. And that is a 225 megahertz increase in performance with this particular card. This card also features a 240 millimeter rad, which is a WaterForce Extreme from Aorus, or Gigabyte, if you will. This card also offers RGB, and it also features a total of 7 video outputs. But we need to clarify something here so there's no misunderstanding when it comes to the video outputs, and we can take a look at that as we get into the card. So we're getting a total of 3 DisplayPort 1.4 outputs. We're getting a total of 3 HDMI 2.0 B outputs, and we're getting 1 USB Type-C Virtual Link for VR outputs. Now, this card actually only supports 4 simultaneous displays at a single time, which is a bit of a downgrade from what I experienced from the 1080 Ti, as it supported 5 displays. This may or may not play a factor for any of you. Since I have a dedicated gaming rig, this is not really going to matter for me anymore. But when I had a single rig that I was using for gaming and work, I did utilize all 5 ports, and I could have even used more than that. But now I don't have to worry about that. So with this particular card, you actually have 2 areas here, which is not really apparent in this diagram. Actually, it is. If we look over here on the right, if you notice, there is a section that says A1 and then a section that says A2. A1 is going to be these 2 ports here, which is going to be display port, and then the A2 is going to be the HDMI port. You cannot have displays connected to both of these sections at the same time. You can only utilize one section at a time. So you can either use only A1 or A2, but not both. So the way the configuration, and they've kind of got some diagrams here to kind of show, you can go with 2 HDMI ports from A2, and then use the C, which is HDMI, and you can use B, which is DisplayPort, and then D, which is Type-C. Or you can use the A1 section, which is 2 display ports, and then use B for DisplayPort, HDMI or C, and then of course the D section, which is your Type-C. If you are actually going to maybe be switching between A1 and A2, it does require a reboot. Obviously I don't have any experience with this card as of yet, so I don't know if it's even an option to switch these ports as far as utilization through software, or if it only is activated by physical connection. So I don't know if you could actually have 7 displays connected and then maybe go into some software and enable and disable the displays that way, as you would kind of do with the NVIDIA control panel. I don't know. I won't know that till I actually get the card installed and play around with it. For my personal setup, how I'll be using it is I will be actually using the A2, and I'll be connecting one HDMI port to my QLED display, my TV, another HDMI display or port that's going to go to my gaming capture card, and then the display port, the single display port for B, I'll be connecting that to my gaming monitor. I am not yet taking advantage of VR, but possibly late spring, maybe early summer, I may look into that. Okay, so we've covered the video output ports and how they work. Hopefully I explained that in a way that you can understand. I believe Brian also covers that again in his video. So again, you might want to check his video out for benchmarks and details. I believe now we can go ahead and move on to the actual unboxing. So I've got the I got my Newegg box here. Just arrived. I went ahead and blocked out the address and everything. So it is possible that inside the box that there may be some personal information in regards to the receipt. I'm hoping that it's either folded or face down, so I don't have to do any editing because time is an issue. So I'm trying to avoid any editing that I don't hopefully have to do. So we'll go ahead and get this unboxed here. And I will make a few comparisons later in the video as to why I went with this card over some of the other 2080 Ti cards. Now, for those of you who are aware, oh, good, the receipt is facing down. That's very helpful. And let's get this thing pulled out. Let's throw the box out of here. Sorry about the loud noise. Okay, there it is. I was very hesitant to getting into this series. I gave it a lot of thought, and I will discuss some of that in the later parts of this video. But I am going to take a moment here because I'm not just your normal reviewer. This is for my personal gaming rig, so I like to take a moment of silence. Okay, moving on. So let's get this open. Get to share in this moment together. And the camera is not in the best position as far as zoom. I would like it to be higher so I have a little more control. So again, I apologize for that. I don't know exactly what this is. Okay, so this is the warranty information. I imagine that my receipt and all of this need to go with that. And okay, we got the installation, got a disc, which will be a nice coaster. Actually, okay, so it's got a diagram basically covering what I've already discussed about the video ports. And we have a graphics card quick guide. All right, so let me get this all put back together here. It's off to the side. So after I get this installed and I get the video uploaded, once I learn a little bit more about how the video displays are changed, if it's software or if it's my connection, I'll put that in the description below just to verify in case you guys are wondering. That off to the side. Here we go. Ready? I can't believe I bought this card. But again, I will talk about not necessarily justification, but because I had to really give it a lot of thought. I mean, the cost for one of these, I mean, even though I got it a bit on a discount, these things are not cheap. And I think most of you who are following the 20 series line are aware of that. Just over a little bit. Like we've got some kind of screws, mounting screws. That's 4. And we have a tag there. Sorry about the light. I do a lot of airbrushing and sculpting in this part of this studio, and it's not exactly the best for video content creation because of the lighting that I use. It's great for airbrushing and sculpting, but not really for video content creation. I don't have anything else in there that I need. So, back in. And I will put this off to the side. Now I've gone ahead and pulled out, because I'll make a couple comparisons. I've gone ahead and pulled out my 1080 Ti out of my gaming rig. So as soon as I'm done with this video, this thing is getting installed. But I'm just going to make a couple comparisons. Put this off to the side here. Fingerprint on there. Not too bad. Tell you what, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. You guys can see a little bit better. Then I will lighting is best. Probably be better just to so you can see they, if you notice the difference, and this is one thing that I noticed, that this card doesn't actually have a VRM fan as the 2080 Ti does, because you obviously you've got the water pump or the water block and the pump under the shroud there, and then you've got a fan for the VRMs and the memory. And for this particular card, the water block cools the entire, not just the GPU die, but also the VRMs and the memory. And of course, it does also have RGB. And it's got some orange accents here, but those are all removable, so you don't have to worry about having like actual orange accents on the card itself, if that's something that you'd be concerned about. I no longer build my systems for aesthetic purposes. I build them more for performance and function. So I'm not really going to benefit much from the RGB and things like that. Because the only time I really see my systems, because they're in a server rack, is when I do their 6-month cleaning. Take a look at the back plate. And this is RGB as well. This little emblem here. Turn it around the other way. Okay. And I'll let you guys take a look at the rad. And I'm actually going to be using the Corsair magnetic fans. The RPM on those things is much higher than these. So, and these are RGB fans. All right, set this off to the side here. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and give you guys measurements. And the reason why is oftentimes this may not matter to you guys, but I'm sure some people may benefit from this. But whenever I buy hardware for a computer component, a lot of times if I go to look at reviews or unboxings or anything like that, a lot of the reviewers, they don't provide accurate measurements or measurements at all. And even though sometimes you get the measurements with the specs of the product, a lot of times they're actually wrong, or they're actually the measurements of the physical box and not the actual item. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the actual measurements. I know, like with my personal rig, you know, mine's a very tight fit. So I didn't even know if I was going to be able to use this card. I had to really, in fact, I had to swap the memory out of my system that I'm putting this in, because I had to put low profile memory, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to use this card because of the way the case is. So set this up, get a measurement here. Set it down. So we go all the way to the edge of the backplate on the inside, and we go to the full end of the card. We're looking at 11 3/8. We're 11 3/8 in length. And as far as from the top of the card to the bottom, it looks like I would say 4 7/8. Yeah, I think you could go with 4 7/8. Thickness. I'm gonna go ahead and bust out the calipers for that. I was a little concerned about the thickness as well, because of the way I have my fans in my system. Or I don't need to use the calipers, but well, anyways. Is that right? Okay, that's not working too well. Let me just use the tape measure. I don't know what's wrong with my caliper. The reason why I want to use the caliper is there's a little bit of a edge hang out. Actually, maybe able to get it here. No, can't do that because of the back plate. All right, so I'm going to have to give you a guesstimate. All right, looks like we're looking at 1 5/8 thickness. Okay, so we got that. And as far as the rad, I think it's your standard 240 rad. Ten 3/4. Yeah, 10 3/4 in length. Obviously the 120, so don't worry about that. Bar thickness, I'd say 1 1/8. All right, so the next thing we want to do is this. I definitely want the calipers for thing to work. Okay, the thickness of the tube. This thing keeps jumping around. I'd say about 0.55 millimeters as far as thickness. And let's do the length of the tubes. When I was actually looking at the other two reviewers that actually was able to acquire these cards, they said that the tubes were kind of short. Actually, I'll make the comparison with my 2080 Ti, but they look good on the length. I don't see any issues as far as the length. We're looking at 14.5 inches in length for the tubing. The other thing that they said is that the hoses were kind of stiff. They're not too bad. I mean, when I compare it with the with my 1080 Ti, as far as the stiffness, I mean, I don't really notice much of a difference. I do notice a difference in the braiding that goes on with these, and let me pull that. Let me show you the 1080 Ti. So 1080 Ti, the actual braiding is real fine, but on the Aorus, it's a lot. I mean, you could probably even see it without me bringing it up to the camera. It's, hopefully I'm getting the focus there. It's pretty thick. It's a lot bigger. But as long as it works, that's all that matters. Okay, so covered all that. And that is the card. I can't think of anything else we need to cover other than what the other two parts that I want to discuss. So that's the unboxing and the overview as far as specs on the GIGABYTE Aorus RTX 2080 Ti Extreme Water Edition. It's a mouthful. So now I want to take a moment just to discuss why I bought the 2080 Ti, specifically this card, because obviously you can tell, I've got, a 1080 Ti, and this is a good card. In fact, I've decided to go ahead and keep this card because it has been a good card. And since NVIDIA has decided to stop making these, and because these were so good, I feel like, instead of selling, because normally what I do is I sell my old cards and I use it as a recuperation to upgrade to a newer card. But I've decided to go ahead and just keep this one, I guess more for sentimental value. So let's get into why I decided to upgrade. Okay. Even though this is a great card and it's done me good, I won't lie. It's been disappointing to me on the fact of when I bought this card, I bought it with the expectations of being able to play at that time when it was released, the current AAA titles and older AAA titles at 4K 60 FPS ultra settings, or at least 75% of the settings set to ultra, and maybe a couple of others, dumbed down to maybe, medium or high. But that has not been the case of this card. And not to throw anybody under the bus, and I'm very direct, so sometimes it comes off as rude, but Gamers Nexus, along with a few other channels out there, make this claim that the 1080 Ti can do 4K 60 FPS. And I think that statement is kind of a bit subjective. But unfortunately, and Gamers Nexus is awesome. Steve is great. He's generally very objective about his approach and his, testing methodology and things like that. But that statement, to me, I feel is very subjective, because when I bought this card, like I said, I had the intention of being able to do 4K at ultra settings at 60 FPS with either all settings ultra or 75% of them, and this card can't do that. I maybe have just a couple of titles that can kind of do that, but most of the titles, I would say about a third of them I can do, 75% ultra settings and get 4K 60 FPS. But another third, I would say I can do 4K 60 FPS, but I've got to really mix and match of low, medium, high, and ultra to make sure I get that 60 FPS. And then I have another third of games that just no matter what will not do 4K, regardless of whatever the settings are, if they're low, medium, high, or ultra. And I end up having to drop it to 1440p and play around with the settings there to get my 60 FPS. Or I have to use the resolution downscaler, the modifier, and not actually run it at 4K. And for the money that I paid for this at the time, I paid $750 for this card, and then I also got the warranty for another, I think, $65. I just felt that it should have been able to do that, and it didn't. But I don't want to, even though I sound like I'm complaining about it, this has been a good card, and it was definitely better than the 980 Ti that I had before that. But it just didn't meet my expectations. So the second reason, so that's one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead and look into getting a 2080 Ti. Because when I saw, and it wasn't just Brian at Tech Yes City, I've seen other benchmarks, but when Brian actually did the benchmarks for this card, again, he has the air-cooled version. This thing, not only does it do all AAA titles at 60 FPS, and we're not talking RTX, we're not talking about the ray tracing. I don't care about the ray tracing. Hopefully eventually that'll, get better, but that's not the reason I bought this card. Nor is it the DLSS, even though that's a nice feature, and hopefully we could see more of that. But it was more about the performance that I would get from this. Would I be able to run 4K 60 FPS Ultra? And according to his benchmarks, it will. And not only will it do that, but it will go above and beyond 60 FPS. Sometimes getting into 70 FPS and higher, depending on the game title. A lot of it is going to vary on which game you're playing, how old it is, the game engine, whether or not the developers had the time to optimize it, which unfortunately they don't a lot of times, because the publishers are, putting a lot of stress on them, so they're not able to do the game justice as it should be. Even though we get mad at the developers, it's not the developers we should be getting upset with. In fact, those poor guys are like pretty much a sweatshop, so it's the publishers not giving them the time and resources to be able to optimize the games accordingly and efficiently. So anyways, so that's one of the reasons I was really looking into getting this, because I knew if I went with this card, it would solve the problems that this card was never ever able to do. And the fact that I have a brand new QLED 65-inch HDR, true HDR display for 60 FPS gaming, I definitely wanted to consider this card at that point as well. So the next reason is, more often than not, if I'm playing on my 4K TV, I have to I have to say I have to enable VSync for almost half the games I play in order to eliminate that screen tearing. And you know that's really annoying because of the input lag that it incorporates. Now sometimes I can just enable fast sync and that works, but it kind of goes back and forth depending on which. But I don't like that because of course the input lag that it incorporates. This card, based on the benchmarks, I should not have to do that. And if I do have to do that, then it's probably a fault with the game itself. Um, so, and I'm not going to say I'm never going to have to do VSync, but for most of the games that are out now and some of the old ones, I should not have to be doing it. And if at all, maybe one or two games out of a batch of many. So it should drastically reduce the need for VSync. Now on my gaming monitor, because I've got a G-Sync gaming monitor, obviously I don't have to worry about VSync because I have G-Sync, and of course this thing on my gaming monitor, I do 1440p gaming at 165 frames per second, and this thing does perfectly fine with all that. There's no issues. So in that regard, this isn't really going to benefit me a whole lot with that particular gaming. It's mainly like the 4K gaming that's going to benefit for me, but to each his own depending on what you're going to be using it for. The third reason that I decided to upgrade from this is more about future proofing, because I imagine that this card should last me a minimum of 4 years, and maybe if I'm lucky I can get 6 years out of it. I may be pushing it on the 6 years. That's fine, but a minimum 4 years. So if I hit the middle, maybe get 5 years out of this card before I feel I need to upgrade, I'm good with that. I'm happy with that, especially for what I paid for it. I personally, for the games that I play, I mostly play single player games, but I'm still going to be messing around with multiplayer games. I don't do competitive multiplayer gaming the way I used to. I don't see myself needing to play games beyond 4K 60 FPS or beyond 1440p 165 FPS between now and, not that I'm clairvoyant, obviously, but between now and, 4 to 6 years from now. So I think I'm pretty confident that this card will last me quite a while in that regard. Now, obviously, new titles will be coming out, AAA titles will be coming out later, and as this card gets older, maybe hitting the 3-year mark, I may have to start dialing down settings. I expect it at that point, but I didn't expect it at the launch of the card like this one, which is, like I said, why I was so disappointed in this. But it's fine if it happens with this. But we also have to remember that for single player games, a lot of the really good single player games take 2+ years to develop. So, I mean, by the time that something like that comes out, I think I'll be good in regards to as far as settings. So I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but that's based on the research and my product knowledge and my experience. That's what I'm anticipating. So, and I've already covered that, this card already pretty much exceeds my expectations in regards to 4K 60 FPS gaming with ultra settings. So that was, that's kind of, part of the whole future proof thing. Now let's talk about the last reason why I decided to upgrade from this to this. For those of you who, I don't want to get into politics too much, but for those of you who are staying up to date, there has been a new tariff law introduced thanks to our wonderful president, Donald Trump, who is making America great again, but not so much gaming great again. And I am being, sarcastic, of course. The beginning of the tariff law already started. We already got hit with a 10% increase. Some of us felt it, some of us didn't. Personally, for my rigs, I did not feel that yet, and I shouldn't because I've already done all my upgrading, which is why I did this. But come January 1st of 2019, any imported computer components, if you're doing any upgrading or maybe doing a full custom build, you're going to have to start paying 25% more in regards to tax of the item itself. So this card, and we're going to get into the pricing here in a second. If you go on Newegg right now, you won't see the price, but this card is $1,400. And if you don't live in California, you don't have to pay tax. You will get this card for $1,400. The only problem is right now they're a little scarce as far as availability, as far as stock. So I recommend, if you're interested, get on the auto notify. So as soon as you get notified, you can go ahead and pick one up. But if I would have waited till next year or whatever, past January 1st, this card would not have been $1,400. It'll be $1,750. Now, it might not start right on January 1st. It may go like a little past that, depending if the stock is there, because based on the way the laws work, if the stock is already there before the law actually started to get implemented, the third-party seller or retailer is not allowed to just add on that tax, because they didn't have to pay it, so they can't just put that tax on you. So I don't. It's going to depend on where you get it and whether they have the stock or not. But that's just something you guys want to be aware of. And I've been talking about this quite a bit, even when I did my Ripper build, the live streamed, because believe it or not, a lot of people are not aware of that, and they don't realize that if they wait, they're going to have to pay $300, $400, $500 more just because of this tariff tax, and all of this because of our wonderful President Donald Trump. All right, so we're moving on now. I know I did get a little bit into politics, but I try not to. For the record, I'm an independent. I'm not a Democrat, nor am I a Republican. Personally, I feel that our political system is broken, has been broken for a very long time, and I'll just leave it at that. So, anyways, now let's move into why I chose to go with the GIGABYTE card, as opposed to another EVGA hybrid card or the MSI hybrid card, because those are options. I did neglect to mention that why I even use hybrid cards. I live in South Texas, and we have extreme season changes as far as climate, and our summers are pretty brutal. In fact, right now we're in winter. I don't even have to turn on my heater, because my server room running my systems, it heats up my whole residence perfectly fine. So I don't even have to turn on the heater. Like, I can maintain 78, 79 degrees Celsius, or excuse me, Fahrenheit, for my ambient temperature. But when it comes summertime, that's a whole different ball game, because we get temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So I wanted to, stick with, all-in-ones, especially for, hardware like this. So that's one of the reasons why I like to go with these hybrids. And some of you are probably wondering, why don't I go with custom loop? I've done custom loop. I used to do it, but because of time constraints and because of funding, I don't feel that the performance increase and the aesthetics warrant my time and money to go with a custom loop. I think that's the best way I can put it. I am not a hater of custom loop. In fact, I love people that continue to do it and make, these amazing systems. They do some beautiful work, but it's more about time and money. And because these systems also require a lot more maintenance, or all-in-ones, the only maintenance I do is every 6 months I pull my systems out, I dust them out with a can of air spray, clean the fans with a little bit of alcohol, put them back in, and that's it. If you go with custom loop, just watch a few of Jay's 2 cents videos on custom loops, and you'll see exactly what I mean. I did that for years. Not interested anymore. Moving on to, let's see, we talked about, we're getting into the pricing. So this card, because we segued out of the tariffs, this card's $1,400 at Newegg. Obviously, when it's available, you just have to keep checking, get on the auto notify. The MSI card, hybrid card, that card is actually not available. And the only way to get it is there's like a couple people flipping it on eBay, and they want like $2,000 for it. And we'll get into the specs on that in just a second, but I'm not paying $2,000 for that card. I mean, I'm not going to pay $1,750 for this with the tariff laws. I'm certainly not going to go to $2,000. So the MSI was just not even an option just for the price, at least for me. However, the EVGA, I did make a mistake on this on Tuesday when I did my live stream, because I had mentioned that EVGA had not released their hybrid card, and it just so happens, it bit me in the ass. Tuesday, which was the day I announced that on my live stream, EVGA announced on Twitter that they released their hybrid edition card, which is exactly like this, but it's the 2080 Ti. And the only reason I didn't get it is because I was in a hurry. I neglected to check my Twitter feed before I went live. So I apologize for that mistake for any of you who watched the live stream. So that card is actually in stock. It's available. If you go to EVGA's website, you can buy the 2080 Ti hybrid. It's very much like this. The pricing on that is $1,450, which is $50 more than this card. But we're going to get into the reasons why. Like I said, you may not want to go with that card. Again, it's entirely up to you. But for me, if I wanted to go with the EVGA card, I would have to pay tax. And the tax on that, where I live, it would actually end up costing me $1,570, almost $1,600. Yeah, so that, again, pushed me more towards the Gigabyte Aorus. Now let's talk about specs, because that's, aside from the pricing, the specs are very important. We've already established that the boost clock on this card is 1,770 megahertz. That's without overclocks. That's without doing any overclocking. That's straight from the factory of what you're going to get from this card. Now, the MSI claims that their card is 1,755, which is only 15 megahertz difference from this. So that's negligible. And if that card was available and if it could be overclocked, it might be an option. Again, you'd have to look at price, but I would also want to see benchmarks and whatnot, which is not available. The benchmarks are available for this. So again, I do not recommend anybody, I don't want to tell you what to do, but I would say I do not recommend anybody to buy hardware if you haven't seen the benchmarks first. So, and since MSI is not able to provide that for whatever reason, I don't recommend buying that, which is one of the reasons why I didn't consider it, even if it wasn't $2,000. However, the EVGA, it boosts to 1,635 megahertz, which is 135 megahertz less than this. Now remember, this card is $170 cheaper, $50 cheaper with the base price than the EVGA, but with tax, it's $170 cheaper than going with the EVGA. So this card's more powerful and still cheaper than the EVGA route. So again, I have to lean more towards Gigabyte. Overclocking. The overclocking on this card should be definitely an option, because this card has what is known as a custom PCB of a 16 plus 3-phase VRM. And we'll get into the cooling in just a minute, because that also plays a factor. So this card has, overhead to be overclocked. The MSI, we don't have any information on it, so I can't say it does or it doesn't. But based on what I'm seeing from the card and the specs, I wouldn't expect it to be, I do expect it to overclock, but not by that much. But again, I don't know for sure. We have to wait. The EVGA, on the other hand, I can speak quite a bit on that. And I am going to be a little bit presumptuous, but I'm going to explain why I'm being presumptuous about EVGA and their 2080 Ti card. So I have owned the 980 Ti, the 1070 Ti, and I have the 1080 Ti of the hybrid edition cards, which is the same as what EVGA has now with the 2080 Ti. I have yet to been able to get any of these cards to hold a stable overclock. They just won't do it. These, I suspect, and I haven't exactly verified, I've heard other reviewers say this, but these are reference cards with a all-in-one cooler slapped onto them. So that's why they don't overclock. Now, every now and again, you may get a card that will, and depending on your silicon lottery, but the fact that I own 3 of these cards and not one of them ever overclocked, and believe me, I've tried, and yes, I do know how to do it. It's not rocket science. The fact that none of them overclocked, and it didn't even have anything to do with temperature. Even during the winter, I still couldn't get them to overclock. I suspect that their 2080 Ti version is going to be very similar to this. I believe it's going to be another reference card with just an all-in-one on it, which is fine. That's great. But when it costs $50 more at the base price, and then when you add the tax, it's another, $120 over the Gigabyte Aorus, which is higher performing, has room for overclocking. It's cheaper. Again, it's a no-brainer, in my opinion. And by the way, I should have said this earlier. I neglected this. I'm not affiliated with Gigabyte. I'm not represented. I'm not sponsored or anything like that by Gigabyte. I'm just a consumer that just did my homework, and I came to the conclusion to go this route. But I'm just giving you my rationalization and my thought process based on the research I've done of why I went this route over going with EVGA and even considering MSI. Asus I did not consider because they have yet to release a hybrid card, at least from my knowledge, and the cards that they have, if you go to their website, they're very cryptic. They don't even put their core clock on their website of what the cards can do. Now, Brian at Tech Yes City does have an Asus 2080 Ti that he uses to compare with this card. This card beats it out. Not by a lot, but it still beats it out. So, and I believe the Asus costs more if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so overclocking was another factor of why I went this direction. And another reason was radiator size, rad size. Okay. When you get the 2080 Ti, you're getting another 120. With the obviously the Gigabyte Aorus, you're getting a 240. So that opens up more potentiality for better cooling, which paired that with the 16 plus 3-phase VRM, the power delivery. Again, that just opens up more opportunity for overclocking, higher performance, better gaming experience. Both the MSI and the EVGA are 120s, by the way. Okay, and finally, let's talk about warranty. Okay, both the EVGA and the MSI are a 3-year warranty. So, and that's generally plenty. But I already mentioned I really wanted to get somewhere between 4 and 6 years out of this card if I can, considering how much I paid for it. Because I'm used to paying $750, $800 for a graphics card. This is almost twice that much. It's absurd. Okay. And a lot of gamers in the gaming community are kind of pissed off at NVIDIA because of these prices. Now, I don't want to get into all of the history and all that, but there's a lot of variables as to why these things are costing so much. I'll give you one of them, the Bitcoin miners. They fucked us gamers, and they fucked NVIDIA. And they also kind of fucked AMD. So that's a big reason why we're paying so much for these. And all I can say is just do your homework. Go on Google, YouTube. It's all right there. That's not what this video is about, because I could turn it into a long-ass video about the history of all that. Just put it this way. NVIDIA stock, Brian did a video back in November, was down 25% because of the Bitcoin miners, and it was declining. So, yeah, the Bitcoin miners fucked us. So, anyways, you get a 3-year warranty with the EVGA, and you get a 3-year warranty with the MSI. The Gigabyte Aorus comes with a 4-year warranty. Now, you can buy an extended warranty for these, but you got to pay about another. I paid $65 for the extended warranty on this, but they base it off the price. So if you're going to get the 2080 Ti, which is going to end up being over almost $1,600, you're probably going to have to pay another $100, maybe even more, to get an extended warranty on it if you want that. You don't have to do that with this. So that is, you know, for the most part, the reasons and my rationalization of why I decided to go ahead and upgrade. Did I really want to upgrade it? Not really. I mean, yes, I would like to be able to get, you know, 4K gaming with ultra settings, 60 FPS. But considering all the specifics, the variables, the tariff taxes, and the fact that these things are not going to be coming down in price anytime soon, do your homework. You'll figure that out. I felt that it's either now or I'm stuck with this for another 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer, because of the price of these and the tariff laws. Because, you know, Trump's still got quite a bit of time left in his term, and he may even get reelected. So, you know, I said, you know what, I don't care what it takes. You know, if I'm eating ramen for the next 3 months, so be it. Let me take care of this now. That's my rationalization, guys. Okay, guys, I think that about does it for this unboxing and overview of the GIGABYTE Aorus RTX 2080 Ti Extreme WaterForce Edition. If any of you found this information to be of any benefit and you like what you experienced, I would please like to request that you hit the like button, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you get notified when I either go live or I upload a new YouTube video. And I do want to thank you very much for watching. And as always, guys, keep gaming.